Hey guys, welcome back. You made it to week 2 of creative writing, and this week we begin to write a story. We're going to learn all about how a story is formed and what you need to make a good story. So I hope you have at least watched the movie The Wizard of Oz, because we are going to be using that story as our foundation to learn how to create your own story. So before we begin, I recommend that you, if you haven't already, you stop this video and you go to the links in the bottom of this, whatever that is, and go find those print-offs that I've provided there. They're at my Teachers Pay Teachers store, and it's free. But we're going to go over those worksheets as we talk. And so it'll be really good to have it in front of you so you can look at what I'm talking about. I'll have them here to show you too, but that way you can look at them. It's also your template for brainstorming your own story, so you'll need that as well. If you don't want to go print those off, or you can't for some reason, just get a piece of paper and pen so you can take some notes and know what we're talking about. Or you can let me know and I'll help you out however I can. So right now, get that if you can do it. It's just a few pages. It won't take long. All right, so let's get started. The first thing you need when you're writing a story is you need characters. So we're going to go into the 3 things that you need. The first thing you need is characters. The second thing you need, this is the worksheet we're going to be looking at. It says brainstorming a plot. You need is a setting. So characters are anything. They don't have to be people. They can be whatever you want, but there's the heroes and the villains of your story. The setting is where and when your story takes place. Again, there's nothing that you have, no hard and fast rule. You can make it anything you want. The third thing you need is a plot. And we're going to be looking at this page, plot diagram, when we talk about plot. So let's go back first of all to the first thing you need. You need characters. You can't have a story without characters. So we're going to talk about The Wizard of Oz, I told you. And we're going to talk about the characters in that story to give you an idea of how to form your character. So you have 2 types of characters. You have the hero, the heroine, what we also call the protagonist, and then you have the villains, which we call the antagonists. So in The Wizard of Oz, our main character or our protagonist is going to be Dorothy. We also have the Tin Man, the Lion, and the Scarecrow. You have lots of other protagonists along the way, like the Good Witch, and I would say Toto is probably even a main character in some ways in that story. And then your villains, or your antagonist, that's going to be your Wicked Witch. That's going to be the Wizard of Oz. It's going to be the bad people that they encounter, the flying monkeys. But the main one throughout the entire story is basically the Wicked Witch and eventually the wizard. So you're going to need a main character or protagonist, and you're going to need somebody or something that is the antagonist or the villain in the story. So why do we need a villain? Well, every good story has a problem. If you don't have a problem, you don't really have a story. You're just kind of telling facts. And nobody really wants to hear a story that's just facts. So you have to have some sort of conflict or problem. Now, there are many different kinds of problems. So we're going to go over those. There's 4 main ones, but some can break them down into even more, but mainly 4. So we're going to go over the 4. First problem you can have is man versus man, or human versus human. So in The Wizard of Oz, we have Dorothy versus the witch. That's a problem. She has to not get killed by the witch, not get caught by the witch. So she's facing that problem with the Wicked Witch throughout the whole story. The second type of problem you have is man versus nature. In the beginning of the story, Dorothy gets taken up into a tornado and wakes up in another unfamiliar place. So that's her versus nature. The problem is there's a tornado coming. She's trying to escape it, but it gets her. The third type of problem you can have is man versus self. And this is really the main problem of The Wizard of Oz, if you look at it as a whole, is Dorothy versus herself. Her problem in the beginning is she's unhappy in Kansas. She's singing about somewhere over the rainbow and somewhere better than where she is. And she wakes up in a place that she doesn't know. And in the end, she says there's no place like home. She wants to go back to that place. So throughout the whole thing, she's in this conflict with herself of whether or not home is where she really wants to be. And so it's an internal conflict within herself. It's not against anybody or anything else. The last kind of conflict we have is man versus society. And you see that in the whole character of the story. Oz, you have, Munchkin Land and Dorothy and the Tin Man and all of them, and the Good Witch. They're all sort of a conflict against the Wizard of Oz. And so you have this man versus society, society being a larger group. It can be the government, it could be a group of people, it could be some sort of organization, it can be anything but man versus society. So you see all four types of conflict in the Wizard of Oz, and usually you'll see all four types in any story you read, unless it's a short story, but you'll see conflict throughout the story because conflict is what keeps the story going, and it needs to be resolved. So we have characters and we have a problem. So that gives us a story, but we need to put it in a place. So we have setting, where and when. Where is Oz set? The Wizard of Oz, it's set in Kansas to start off with, on Dorothy's farm, and then it moves to the Land of Oz, or the Emerald City, and then back to Kansas. So that's where it happens. When it happens, the early 20th century. So it's where and when, not just where. That's your setting. So finally, we're going to get to, let me look at my notes, to the plot. So when you're writing a story, you get your characters, you get your setting, you have to have, and you have a problem, you have to have a plot. How does it move along? The conflict is what moves it along. So we're going to talk about that. The first thing you want to do when you're writing a story is you want to catch your reader's attention. You want to have something interesting to say right from the get-go so they don't put it down. I think it's about 7 seconds to really catch your readers is what you get. If you don't get them in the first couple of sentences, they're probably going to put it down and not want to read it. So you want to get something that's going to catch their attention. In the beginning of The Wizard of Oz, this isn't in the very beginning, but she sings Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and you kind of get caught up in what's going on because she's in this desolate farm, deserty place, and so that's kind of the hook. So you want to think of a way to start it out with, let's talk about the Bible. How does it start out? In the beginning. And so you're like, well, what happened in the beginning? That's a good hook. It's a really good hook, probably the best hook. So the second thing you're going to want, we're going to look at this paper right now, the plot diagram. The second thing, so you get your hook, you get your rising action. This is where your problems come in. You're going to have event 1, event 2, and event 3. And they're going to all lead to your climax. Now, the events are different things. So in The Wizard of Oz, what do you have? You have Dorothy's house lands on the Wicked Witch, and then she meets the Munchkins, and then she meets I don't remember what order she meets them all in, but the Tin Man, Lion, and the Scarecrow, and they have problems along the way they have to solve as they're going down the Yellow Brick Road. The big problem is she's trying to get home, but along the way they face these smaller problems. And so those are event 1, event 2, and event 3. And they all lead to the climax. So when it comes to the climax, and you're talking about stories, a lot of times people will have different opinions on what the climax might be. I think it's pretty obvious in The Wizard of Oz. I don't think it can be really disputed. It's when Dorothy and her friends all get to the Emerald City and they're there with the Wizard of Oz. That's the climax. And then you have the next thing. See if you can see that. Falling action. So we have the climax with the wizard, and then the curtain gets pulled back. Toto pulls the curtain back, and the wizard is revealed to just be this man behind the curtain. And then events begin to happen. Now, the falling action is what resolves your biggest problem. So her biggest problem was she needed to go home. So after the wizard is revealed and what's going on in Oz, then they begin to have events that lead to the conclusion of the story, which that's our last one right here, resolution or conclusion. And that solves your problem. That conclusion is where your problem is solved. And so she finally clicks her heels together and says there's no place like home, and wakes up at home where she wanted to be all along. And the internal conflict she had with where she lived and not wanting to be there anymore is resolved because she's so glad to be home. So we have a whole story set out. So anytime you're writing a story, you want to think of events that are going to happen throughout your story that are going to lead to a climax that's going to lead to solving your problem, the falling action, and then the resolution of the problem. So this is your assignment. You're going to write your first story. Don't make it super long because I have to read them all in a day. So I need you to keep them, I know some of you, it'll be hard to make a page. Some of you, it will be super long. But keep it to maybe a page or two if you can, maybe more. I'll allow it, but just think of me when you're writing, okay? So I want you to come up with 3 events for your rising action. Come up with your problem, come up with your characters, come up with your setting, come up with your climax, and then events that lead to the resolution of your problem as well. Here is what you're going to write about. I want you to think about something along the same lines as Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. Your character, it can be anyone or anything, it doesn't have to be a human, wakes up in an unfamiliar place and needs to get home. So that's your problem. Include different types of conflict. You can include nature, that's how they get there. You can include man versus man versus society, any of those things. But your story needs to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It needs to have a problem, characters, there needs to be a hero and a villain, at least one of each, and a setting. We need to know where it takes place. And then it needs to be resolved and concluded. Tie it all up with a nice little bow in the end. So, now here's the last thing I want to talk to you about writing. We're doing creative writing right now. But writing comes in all kinds of forms, and there's many, many different purposes for writing. One purpose, like this purpose here for The Wizard of Oz, or what we're doing, is entertainment, just a story. Sometimes writing, we may write something down to inform someone of something else. That would be like a newspaper or a magazine. Sometimes writing can be a record of what's happened. Sometimes that would be like history. Sometimes it might be for a lesson. Jesus told stories all the time that taught us lessons. We call them parables. There's also fables. Writing can be for a multitude of reasons. And so when you're sitting down to write something, you need to think about what's your purpose. What are you trying to accomplish here? Do you want people to learn something? Do you want people to be entertained? Do you want to make them laugh? Then it needs to be a comedy. Do you want to make them scared? That's a horror. Do you want to make them cry? That's a sad one. Do you want to make them feel all in love and things like that? That's a romance. What's your purpose? Are you trying to entertain, or do you have another purpose in what you're writing? We will be writing all kinds of different stuff and have all kinds of different purposes in what we write over the next 16 weeks. So today, or this week, your purpose is to entertain us. Use your imagination, go crazy with it, and have fun. And I can't wait to read your stories. So good luck.